Good evening, everybody. Hope your Thursday's gone very, very well. This is EFL Debate, the League Two podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Ben Jones, a Tranmere Rovers supporter. He's got a bit of an eye for League Two as a whole. And we're also joined by Ewan for the evening, Ewan Hudson, who's a Bradford City supporter. And we'll start with you, Ewan, on the vacancy at Valley Parade. First of all, I suppose your reaction to Mark Hughes losing his job a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, I think we all saw it coming, sadly. I mean, obviously the start to the season hasn't been what we expected. Maybe in terms of position compared with the strength of the league, we are maybe where we're meant to be. And certainly with the recruitment in the summer maybe wasn't good enough to quantify being in and around the playoffs. But it was more the performances, obviously. We looked really lackluster. The players didn't look like they had a clue what was going on. And they didn't look like they was fitting the system or the tactics at all. So I think it was, in terms of a sacking, I think you'd say that it was the hardest one sort of to bite the bullet, as opposed to others where maybe you thought, oh, well, he could stay and see us through. And it was obviously a risk, but obviously it seems to have at the moment paid off.
Sure. Ben, what did you make of Bradford when you saw them play at Prenton Park on the 3rd?
They weren't that different from when we played them last season. They tried to keep the ball, and I guess the only change this time was they didn't really have any cutting edge in the final third. It was kind of their attacking option at that point was, cross the ball to Andy Cook, and if he doesn't score, he did get one, but if he doesn't score, they're not really going to do a whole lot else. I think Alex Patterson possibly went off injured in that game as well, which maybe changed the dynamic there, because you expect him to kind of make those runs from deep sometimes. I said pre-season, and I think from what I saw that game as well, they're kind of a mid-table side with the way League Two is panning out, and maybe it's a good opportunity to change manager, get some fresh eyes on it, and try and go in a bit more of a progressive direction.
Well, talking of fresh eyes, Ewan, Kevin McDonald's come in, 3 wins out of 3 in League and Cup, I should add. It feels like there's a different energy about Bradford City under Kevin McDonald. And of course, we've got to be really careful and apply a lot of scepticism when it comes to the sort of new manager bouts when a caretaker does really well, because sometimes that doesn't mean they're give them a 5-year contract tomorrow sort of thing. At the same time, I think speaking to Bradford City fans, there's a lot of encouragement at the improvement in performances under Kevin McDonald, and there's possibly an instinct that this might be something more than a kind of caretaker bounce.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think from my point of view, I think it's come as this release of being freed from the slightly maybe stale or aging tactics of Mark Hughes into a player who really knows this level and knows the EFL and knows how to get the best out of players at this level, which is why we've seen a really positive home performance against Swindon, and then we ground out the win against Wimbledon as well, adding on the win midweek in the EFL Cup against Grimsby.
2 teams begin with G. You're
it's the same.
It feels like there's a bit more of an aggression about Bradford City under Kevin McDonald from what I can see, and also a willingness to play the ball forward early, which kind of suits the personnel you've got available to my eyes.
Yeah, definitely. I think I spoke about it when I was last time. I think we've got some very tricky players that can sit in that 10 role or out wide, and I think we need to utilise them more. I mean, like you said, Ben, we were really a one dynamic team for the most of this season, and that is why we have struggled, because we haven't really played to our strengths or all of our strengths. I think we experimented with the 3 at the back at the start of the season. It didn't work. Then we tried 4, and we were still sort of lacking in the tactics department. But this has just been, I think, in the last 3 games, a return to simplicity, which is why we've looked so. We've obviously not looked like world beaters, but we have looked solid and we've looked organised, which I think is definitely more than you can say that we were under Hughes.
For sure. Well, I do want to talk as well about some of the candidates for the job. I mean, as much as Kevin McDonald has done great, it would be early for him, I think, considerate to jump straight from playing into managing, especially without an experienced assistant, to my knowledge. So I wanted to look at some of the other candidates. In terms of favourites, you're looking at well, Kevin McDonald is the heavy odds on favourite.
Yeah, actually, well, it has changed recently. After the Wimbledon match on Saturday, it shifted actually, and Kevin McDonald is now the favourite. Before, I think it might have been Neil Redfern who was up there alongside.
I can't see him go for Neil
Richardson.
Redfern. Surely.
No, I can't either. No, I think Liam Richardson is the other one who's the big name, but no one really knows at the moment. I don't know. Obviously, at the start of when he came into the job, he was very adamant that he wanted to return to playing. He didn't want to stay and end his career to become a manager. But he seems to have possibly shifted away from that after the players have come out and backed him for the job. Obviously, he's got 3 wins under his belt now as well in 3 games. And it seems that there's been no sort of conversation with CEO Ryan Sparks about who may come in the door. So they're taking it on a game-by-game basis, which I think is absolutely right.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I do want to sort of touch on other candidates as well, though, Ewan. You've got Danny Cowley in the mix. You mentioned Liam Richardson there. Dean Holden, who I actually interviewed on this podcast earlier today, has come across really well. So just wondered, any names that have caught your eye?
I think Danny Cowley has, because obviously it's he's experienced head at this level, but still in that bracket of young managers who like to play the ball fast and keep things moving. I think he would be very, very good. I think he's the name that's caught a lot of eyes at the moment.
Would you like the idea of appointing Danny and Nicky Cowley, but then maybe bringing Kevin McDonald onto the coaching staff?
He's definitely got something to offer, but I think that will be a personal decision. A lot of people around the club and the fans have been, usually our fan base is quite up in arms, and we're a very passionate fan base with decisions. But everyone seems to have a level head in the building at the moment about where McDonald goes after this, and it is very much up to him. He obviously wants to continue playing, especially after the long break he had before coming to Bradford. So I think he definitely has an opportunity in the future to come into coaching, but I think he'll be more interested in getting back into the team.
Interesting. Ben, from the candidates spoken, I suppose so much depends on how Kevin McDonald does between, however long his interim period is. Which of the external candidates do you think would be right for Bradford City?
I guess it's going to depend what they want the new manager to do. Do they want the new manager to get the best out of the current squad, or build a better system and recruit players for that system? Because I think you're probably looking at 2 different profiles of manager for that. I think if you can think a little bit more long term and look kind of towards next season, then there's probably some good managers in the National League that aren't on that shortlist. Sort of Parkinson and so on, who play good football. But I think with
Phil Parkinson's have done well at Bradford City in the past as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously we'll see him on Saturday when Wrexham come as well. But your comment about the 2 different types of managers is absolutely right. I think the last thing we want is another dinosaur. I think at the club, I think everyone is very burnt out on a manager who possibly was not able to coach players at this level in an effective way. There's been a lot of players who have actually come out in the past sort of 2 weeks and in interviews have berated the tactics that have been used as being quite stale and old-fashioned, and certainly not capable of being performed by League Two players. I think Cowley is the candidate for a long-term investment for the club, someone who's going to build a long-term project.
I think he would get the best out of the squad as well, because if I think of Danny Cowley's style, it's aggressive against the ball and it's play forward early in a positive way with quality. Not necessarily, I think he gets pigeonholed as a long ball manager. I personally don't see him as that. although sides can go direct when they need to. But that's how I think this Bradford squad suits. I think if you bring a manager in and they rip everything up and go possession football, might work long term, but actually in terms of getting the most out of the current squad, and you've got a sniff of the playoffs, I would worry about too much of a transitional period from that point of view.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we have the squad to certainly have a tiny look in to the sort of the very sort of bottom end of the playoffs. But I don't think we would make it, especially after changing manager mid-season, and then again, possibly when we bring someone new in, whoever that may be, to replace Kevin McDonald. I think we do have the players to play that style of football. But one of the most positive things from the summer was, for once, a very low turnover of ingoings, outgoings. The core of the squad has remained, and I think that's something important that we should definitely be thinking about going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're joined by two fans here who are supporting clubs with possibly long-serving caretaker managers, and we're joined by a fan of MK Dons, where the caretaker stint was very short because the Graham Alexander was dismissed by MK Dons the other day, but being replaced very quickly by Mike Williamson, and I'm joined by Jonathan Harries to discuss that. Looks like there's going to be a stylistic change at Stadium MK, Jonathan.
Yeah, well, you say, yeah, stylistic change from what Graham Alexander was brought in to do. It's something that we're obviously familiar with Russell Martin, Carl Robinson, Liam Manning, all wanting to play this attractive style of play. And I'm really, on the one hand, I'd have liked to see Graham Alexander maybe given a bit more time. I think, in hindsight, I think the two home games against Harrogate and Barrow were probably his like the nails in his coffin, because to capitulate like that against Barrow on Saturday, I think a lot of fans said it. If he'd kept the win, we wouldn't be. Well, I wouldn't be on this show talking about MK Dons probably. And
we'd have you on anyway. We love you, Don.
To be fair, the fan base was really turning on him, and I think we were all in shock when Aqua fired in that equaliser. It was just a stunned silence. And again, fair play to Liam Sweeten and Pete Winkleman. They've acted quickly, they've acted decisively, sounded like they got on the phone to Gateshead Monday morning and got the wheels in motion. Mike Williamson's obviously come down with a big reputation for his style of football. Really excited to see players like Conor Grant and Dawson Devoy, and maybe even if he comes back in January, possibly Dan Kemp could possibly get his act together at Stadium MK. And I'm just genuinely looking forward to seeing how he progresses the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, as considering the sort of period of uncertainty, I suppose, at Tranmere over what the long-term plan is, do you sort of look at MK Dons with a bit of envy in terms of how quickly and decisively they've acted?
Definitely in terms of the manager they've got. I think Williamson was one that a few of us were kind of hoping we would get. It would kind of be a development on the style we've tried to change to unsuccessfully. But looking longer term, I think that was a kind of appointment we were hoping for. And it's definitely one you would kind of associate with teams MK Dons have had over the past sort of decade, where generally they're good on the ball and breaking between the lines, which is kind of what Gateshead seemed to have been for the past couple of seasons. So he's a really good appointment. And I mean, I do wonder if it was something that was possibly planned for a week or two and they just kind of were waiting, because for it to happen in one day seems, a bit unusual. So I wonder if kind of in the background there was some conversations being had anyway. And then, there's a couple of results they had were kind of, as Jonathan said, kind of like the final nail. And at that point, they decided to follow through on plans they had.
Yeah, it's interesting that actually when you think about it, Jonathan, because it strikes me that when those two late goals went in against Barrow, was there? I'm not saying Pete Winkleman would have been sort of happy about that at all, but I do wonder if there's almost part of him that was relieved that he's got to that the sacking would have been made after dropped points and the disappointment of that, as opposed to maybe the confusion at winning and then making that change. But I suppose there's a lot of excitement about the style of football coming. Who are the players that you think could benefit from the style?
Well, if I can address my only one concern at the minute, it would be the goalkeeper in this Mike Williamson system. Now, from what I've seen on the highlights from Gateshead, they like to build from the back and use the goalkeeper a lot, much like Russell Martin did with Andrew Fisher. So the only thing I'm a bit nervous about, I'm not saying you can't do it, is McGivery's distribution. I'm wondering if maybe January we might go for a keeper that's slightly better with his feet. Again, I'm not counting it out that McGivery will mess it up or anything, but it's just he's not quite as good at his feet as I've seen other goalkeepers at Milton Keynes Dons be. I think someone like I think the wing backs of Cameron Norman will benefit from this. I think Jonathan Lecco, if Williamson can get a tune out of Jonathan Lecco and get him in between the lines as well, running at defenders and his end product, I think he can benefit. I think Mawisa or Ellis Harrison can benefit and keep.
Do you think Harrison suits the possession heavy system?
Yeah, he's not quite cut it. He scored against Gillingham, but that's really the only positive thing that Ellis Harrison's done, and it's not for the want of trying. And Alexander seemed to want to stick with him like through it all, and it'll be interesting to see who he starts against Accrington on Saturday. I mean, the common sense thing would be Ellis Harrison plus people around him to combat the physicality of Accrington, but I wouldn't be against maybe a Max Dean Mawisa sort of thing, using our pace to get in behind sort of thing.
Because I think Isa likes to drop in around the edge of the box and use his skill to create something out of nothing, and Dean's just got that frenetic energy. So whether they could form a nice pairing in the right system.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll just be really interesting to see who he picks as the two players in the sort of 8 and sort of 10 position, whether it'll be Harrison and Devoy or it'll be Lecco and Payne. Because I think he could be another one. Jack Payne could be another one that could thrive in this system. It's just so nice to actually going back to our old system and knowing that it's worked in the past under Russell Martin, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, I can see your phone's getting excited as well, Jonathan. Listen, it's been great to have you on. Hopefully, good football's coming back to Stadium MK, and we look forward to having you back on later in the season to have a look at how it's getting on.
Well, fingers crossed. Thanks for having me on. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah, cheers, Jonathan.
Cheers, Jonathan.
Delighted to bring in our next guest, which is Ryan from Up the U's. Good evening, Ryan. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, we're really well. I suppose we're quite curious about Colchester, because last time we had you on, we were talking about this sort of inconsistently enigmatic team that on a really good day can cause problems for the best teams in the league, like we saw against Notts County. But also has that soft underbelly. And I suppose it's the other side, the soft underbelly, that's kind of come to the fore more in recent weeks. What do you make of the drop in performances of late?
It's a hard one, because the game against Morecambe was... I said that the Wimbledon game from earlier on in the season was the worst I've seen him play. Morecambe has to be up there. It was really scary to see how bad we was without Arthur Reed, which if any team's got anything about them, they'll realise now Colchester without Arthur Reed seemed to struggle. That final ball into the final third, the player to just muscle a player off the ball is him. So if we isolate him out of the game, they haven't really got anything. But the thing at the moment with the club is you can just see in the players, none of them are playing with any confidence. Noah Chilvers, in the Morecambe game, we get a penalty right near the sort of tail end of the game. And me personally, and I think most people in the ground thought, let Joe Taylor take this. Leading goal scorer, and unless he took one in the horrible shootout against Cardiff, the last penalty he took was at Wembley Stadium for Luton in the cup final to get him promoted, and he scored it. And Chilvers took the ball. He is the penalty taker. So for me, I was like, he is the penalty taker. Let him take it. And unfortunately, he skied it over the bar. And at the moment, the COU fans, every sort of first half and second half of the season, they seem to, I'm not going to use the H word, but seem to dislike a player a lot. At the moment, it's unfortunately Noah Chilvers, who is a young academy player who.
He's not that young anymore, though, Ryan. He's had a few seasons, like 3 or 4 years, in and around the first team now. Are we not getting to a stage now, considering the way Colchester operate in terms of they do go for a young squad? Are Colchester fans not entitled to want more from Noah Chilvers and want him to step up and maybe be a bit more of a senior player?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like you say, I think he's like 24, 25 years old. So it is young, but like you say, the amount of game time he's had in League Two, he is an experienced League Two player. So the thing that's annoying for COU fans is we know how good he can be. But we always, like Colchester, we always have the 3 stages of Colchester. And we get the 3 stages of Noah Chilvers. We get the, oh my God, Noah Chilvers, calm down, or you're going to be sold for big money. The, oh my God, Noah Chilvers, you look like you're sort of non-league level. And the, Noah, can you do something? You're all right, but you're not pulling up trees. And at the moment, we're sort of at the non-league style Noah. But all COU fans know, as soon as he switches it on, he's going to be deadly again. And having Matt J as a backup, and a youngster, Che Cooper, in the past couple of games has been brilliant. Hopefully that will try and spur him on a little bit. But for me personally, I think he does need a game or 2 away from the first team to just sort of maybe reset himself and then come back in. But with the injuries we've got at the moment, we just don't really have anyone. If we pull him out of the team, we haven't got that instant replacement. I think Matt Jay's coming back from either an injury or, as Ben Garner said, football-related issues keeping him out of the team. And Jay Cooper's a very young player. Must be a teenager. So to chuck him in at the weekend for me, I would like to see that, because he's in the Morecambe game and the game on Tuesday night against Cambridge, he was very, very good. But to give him a game against Harrogate, which is going to be another tough game at home, if he does a couple of things wrong, the fans will get on the back of the players, and that might he might coward a little bit. But it's just like I say, it's just you can see that at the moment the players are playing with no confidence, because as soon as they do one pass wrong, they're going to have the fans on their back shouting at them, and it's just not a good place to be at the moment.
Do you think, Ryan? I think last time you were on, we were speaking that you maybe were lacking a bit of a midfield general to kind of hold it all together. And I was having a look at some of the sort of attacking stats in League Two before the show. And I was quite surprised to see that if you look at the most sort of creative players in the division in terms of the passing and so on, Noah Chilvers and Arthur Reed are both in the top 10 in terms of passes into the final third and progressive passes, key passes, all those kind of things. Which suggests to me you're not really, and I think some of your results as well kind of back this up, you're not really having too many issues going forward. It's just kind of that teams are probably breaking you down a bit too easy, which is a similar issue to we've got at Tranmere, to be honest. But do you think that, is there anyone in the squad who could maybe step into that role, or do you think it's kind of wait until January to see if you can get someone then?
I think in the terms of going forward, we've got the cover. Obviously, at the moment, we've got Reed, on his last game of his suspension, he got a 3-game suspension after being an absolute hero. He goes and kicks a player and gets a 3-game suspension. And when Reed and McGeehan are together, they look brilliant, and they look. I believe you said it, Gabe, when McGeehan signed it. It was like, how have we signed him?
Yeah,
and also Jay
a League One
Mingy
promotion winner.
Yeah, exactly. And Jay Mingy, he looks like a very good player. He does look like a little bit of a hothead. He does like to sort of throw his body about a bit. But even him, we when they were getting their match fitness, McGeehan was coming off and Mingy was coming on, and it was literally a swap of the exact same style of player. And now all of them have got their fitness. In the midfield, I think we're okay. Going forward, we're all right.
Is Mingy injured at the moment, or?
So Mingy got ironically, Mingy got a suspension against Forest Green. So in the past, I think it's in the past 4 games, we have 3 players sent off, and they've been Reed, McGeehan, and Mingy. So it hasn't been ideal,
right?
But the problem, the defence, it hasn't been an issue, but it has been an issue. Mitchell, Connor Hall, and Egbo, all of them together.
Well, that's the other thing. Just to sort of add to what you're saying there, Ryan. It's like, because you've got such a youthful side, you're going to need your senior players to either be available, and some of them that you've mentioned they haven't been, or you want them to be on top of your game. So we talked about Chilvers earlier. Connor Hall, I think, is another massive one where it's like, I think, a good Connor Hall is a top defender at this level. I've seen it at Port Vale. I know what he's capable of, but a bit like Chilvers, he's just not been at the level. And unfortunately, the nature of the squad dictates that you're kind of relying on these sorts of players, your big hitters, to be at it.
Yeah. Against Forest Green at the weekend, that was a horrible game to go to. I personally didn't go, but to every fan that went,
that's right across the country as well.
Exactly, yes. And at the end of the game, all the fans have travelled that way. We've just been pumped 5-0. You don't expect the players and the managers to come over and shake everyone's hands, but all of the sort of the managers and players, I believe, just done a little clap to the fans and then walked off. But Connor Hall and Manny Egbo went over there and spoke to the fans and said, look, we are trying, but at the moment, I think Connor Hall's words were, I'm giving 100%, but I can't make others do that. And Egbo said, when it clicks, it's going to be great. But at the moment, it's just not quite there. But a lot of fans have been wanting the back line to change. But again, with the injuries, they just couldn't do it. If they take Connor Hall out, they're going to replace him with Will Greenidge, who isn't on Connor Hall's level, or replace him with a youngster who, at the moment, we don't need that. We need someone like Connor Hall to sort of go, no, do you know what? Pull my socks up. I'm going to show these boys exactly what we need. But we have had some great news in Nico Lawrence. Does look like he's coming back a hell of a lot sooner than what he was expected to. So having him come back, Dallason's back in the squad now. If Kelleher's back soon as well, that's instantly 3 good, strong backups to the current back 3. So if Connor Hall needs to be dropped, we can replace him with someone on his level.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. I do want to bring in Dan Pearson of Doncaster Rovers in a moment, but I'm just curious, Ryan, to ask you about the attack, because there's a feeling that Samson Tavide there was a feeling that he'd add another layer to his game, and you've got Bradley Ahovian making a bit of a breakthrough season as well. Is the attack still an area of some excitement to you, despite the drop-off in results?
I think so, yes. I think one thing that's starting to show a little bit, which fans are getting a little bit concerned with, is the potential attitude with Joe Taylor. When Joe Taylor's got the ball and he's running through on goal and he's one-on-one with the keeper and he scores, or the keeper makes a good save, he's up for it. But in the games where the final ball isn't coming, or the ball gets played to the left but he's made the run to the right, he just gets really angry and just looks like he just can't be bothered anymore. And that's the sort of problem we're seeing at the moment. But to take Joe Taylor off and put on someone like Bradley Ahovian, who is a Colchester youngster and is, I want to score goals for this team. Yeah. I mean, credit to the lad. He's got in his Twitter bio, I will win a Ballon d'Or. you've got to have some confidence to have that in your Twitter bio and play football. And when he plays, all he wants to do, he'll get the ball, he'll look up and go, where's the goal? There it is. I'm going to run that way. When I can't, I'm then going to look for the. He looks like a goal scorer. So if Joe Taylor does want to sort of throw his toys out the pram, that's fine. We'll bring Brad on, and Brad will just do whatever he can to try and score a goal, set up a goal. And Tavide he's looking hungry. Last season, he looked really, really strong. And this season, he's taken that up a level. He scored more goals already this season than he did all of last season. He's just
finishing training in pre-season then.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing that I wish he would just tone down on a little bit is the blatant pushes and the moaning to the referees, because he has picked up a lot of bookings where you've literally sat there and gone, why have you done that? And most of them have just been, he's gone up behind the player and just pushed him in the back and sent him flying, and the refs walked over to him and gone, well, that's a booking. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, he is going to be, if he can tone that down and still keep working on his finishing, he's going to be a very exciting player for us.
Let's hope that's the case. Just finally from me, Ryan, do you still have some optimism that if the Forest Green loss or Morling, not a loss, can serve as a wake-up call, that Colchester will improve on their current position? Because you look at the potential in this side, sort of pound for pound, you should be better. You should have enough talent to sort of climb certainly into that mid-table bracket.
100%. I think a lot of the fans at the moment on Twitter are saying get rid of Garner now. The problem is you sack Garner now. All the players know how to play Garner's way, and some of them are Garner's players. So you're going to bring in a new manager, and he's going to go, well, you've got 5 strikers, but I only play 1 up front, so I'm only really going to pick 2, maybe 3 in a matchday squad. You've got 3 really talented centre midfielders. Well, I want 4. So it's going to be a struggle, which for me, if they want to get rid of Garner, you get rid of him just in sort of mid to late December, get someone in for January, and then they can do what they want. But for me, stick by Garner. Once the players, like Egbo said, once the players that are injured and the injured players and the not match fit players are back, and then it clicks, I genuinely think we are going to be, like where we played against Notts County and against Gillingham, we're going to be a hard team to beat. But at the moment, it's just one of them things where it's, for Colchester, when it's good, it's great. When it's bad, it's awful.
Yeah, look, I don't want to sort of underplay how difficult it is for fans to take seeing their team get thumped, and you know, I totally sympathise with that. But just from an outside perspective, I don't go every week, and watch Colchester for 90 minutes like you and lots of other fans do. But just from my perspective, I think Ben Garner is a really highly rated coach. I think he's done some good work at this level previously with Swindon. And I think that if you stick with him, as long as you're not in the bottom 2, I think if you stick with him as long as you're reasonably comfortable above the drop zone, I think he's going to develop some players that can serve as possible assets for future seasons, and I think that would prove worthwhile. So from my point of view, I hope the club stands by him. So do I.
He like I said, the way he's been since he's come in, we haven't had a manager like it. There was loads of talk about, which me personally I think is utter rubbish, of the higher ups picking the team, because we played the same formation, the same style of players. They were saying that the director of football was picking the squad and the manager had no say in it. For me, if that was the case, the players that have left and the managers that are left, surely they would say something and be like, yeah, like Hayden Mullins, for example, my time at Colchester was nice, but I didn't get to pick a side. What do you mean by that? Oh, it was picked by the higher ups. It's never come out like that. And whenever the fans ask Robbie Cowling that question, he always just goes, I'm not answering that. It's a load of rubbish. I don't know what you're thinking that that's the case. And he's even like jokingly said, if I was picking a team, we'd be in non-league. Like, he's like, I have no idea what's going on. But Ben's come in, complete new team, complete new style, giving the youngsters a go, which we've always done, but he's given them a go, and he's going to know, look, you have got talent, so you are going to keep playing with Jaden February. And he's just gone, all right, fine, and he's kept playing, and he does look really good. But yeah, I just hope that at the weekend we can, like you say, the first 12 games, we put them beside us and go, right, the season starts now. Let's re-go and let's go again. Because if we could go now for the rest of the season and we're on 8 losses, we can go to 15 losses and then the rest of the season are wins and draws. The fans will look at the start of the season and be like, yeah, it was bad, but look where we finished. So
yeah.
So I'm hoping we stick by Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, hopefully next time we have you on, Ryan, there'll be a bit more positivity at Colchester and there'll be a reaction to the Forest Green game. But thanks for joining us and speak to you soon, mate.
No worries. Take care, guys.
Cheers. So I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Pearson from 18 Dapper, a Doncaster Rovers supporter, excuse me. Great to have you on, Dan. Thanks so much for your time. You must be feeling quite upbeat now as a Doncaster fan, given the form.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on again, Gabe. It really appreciate it. But yeah, like you say, it's a bit more positive than last time I came on. I think last time we'd played 8 games in the league, only won 1, drawn 2. The rest were defeats. I think we'd shipped 15 goals and only scored 7. Whereas now 5 more games added on, 3 wins, 2 defeats. It's still a little inconsistent, but I feel we're turning a corner. Had a really tough start with the teams that we played. We've got a more favourable run on paper, but the game's not played on paper. But with Sutton, Tranmere, Salford, Grimsby, it's teams in and around us, so there should be, you'd like to think, a bit more competitive games and potentially winnable games, but tomorrow night it's going to be tough.
Certainly is. Ewan, what do you make of Doncaster Rovers' form, and do you see them as genuine playoff contenders?
I definitely do. Obviously, they were the team that came out of the summer transfer window flying in terms of recruitment, signing, everyone looking at them going, this is going to be the team to beat. And it hasn't quite worked out. Maybe that, I mean, obviously, like we always say, we don't watch teams for 90 minutes like you do. But from the outside, it definitely looks like there is a bedding in period. And especially with the run that you've had, I mean, in the past sort of few games, you've played some really difficult teams, and even though you've maybe lost, you've looked like you're going to compete. You've run them close, so I definitely see Doncaster as being up there come the end of the season. There's definitely still time for that to come about.
Daniel, how close do you think Doncaster are to being a top 3 side potentially?
I'm still sticking to my pre-season prediction of around 10th or 11th for Donny.
Oh, really? You think you finished that through?
Yeah, I just think it's such a competitive league. You look at the teams up at the top, and I think it's probably just come a season too soon for Grant McCann. I think the recruitment was superb, but it's players that we've brought in from non-league, and it's going to take them time to adapt to a higher level. And even players like Richard Wood, who have played at championship level for the majority of their career, takes a little bit of adapting to come down as well. So we've got 14 injuries at the minute. I think that could be 16.
Oh, really? I didn't know there was as many as 14 actually. Blimey.
Yeah, and I'd probably say maybe 6 or 7 of the 14 would be knocking on the door for first team places.
Could you run me through who would be the ones that you feel like you're missing most keenly at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'd probably Sterry at right back.
Of course, yeah.
I'd say Miller up front, but I think Mo Farrell and Joe Ironside have really started to build a partnership, and Farrell's starting to show what McCann's been saying, that is a player. Initially, I thought his touch wasn't great, looked a bit clumsy on the ball, but is just getting better and better as the games go on. But yeah, I mean, Harrison Biggins has been injured; he's just starting to come back. But yeah, I'd say probably. Yeah, 6 or 7, I'd say should be knocking on the door, or at least providing a bit of competition for the players that are currently there. I think we're asking a lot of the squad that we've got to keep on putting 100% in and going out there and getting results. And like you say, against Stockport away from home, push them to the end, and unfortunately came away with nothing. And then Mansfield in the cup midweek, where we probably should have won that one as well. So there are good teams that we're coming up against, and we're competing, which is chalk and cheese from last season. So yeah, a bit more positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's a bit different as well, Ben, from say Colchester we've just talked about, where they've got a really good academy and they've got a kind of conveyor belt. So although if injury hit them, that's going to hurt them, they've got, they can pluck a really talented 18-year-old out of nowhere, whereas Doncaster don't necessarily have as developed an academy, which obviously means having 14 players out injured probably is going to hurt them in terms of squad depth as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think squad depth for me this season, I think with the summer recruitment, it's probably been the most kind of diverse squad that we've had, and kind of the biggest numbers in terms of players that we've got in the playing squad. We have been really threadbare before the season's even started over the last couple of years. So I think the board and the team at Doncaster have kind of learned from the mistakes and made sure that they've got contingencies in place. But still, 14 injuries is massive. I know every team goes through injury crisis every now and then, but 14's ridiculous. I believe there's inquests going on at the club to find out why, but a lot of them are contact injuries that have happened in games or in training. So I don't know if we're just training a little bit too hard, or we're just unlucky with challenges, or I just don't know. But it just seems like we're on the receiving end of a lot of injuries over the last couple of seasons.
Ben, where do you see Doncaster within League Two at the moment? Do you see them competing for the playoffs?
It's a tough one because there's a few teams in and around that top 7 who are kind of overachieving, possibly based on what people thought pre-season. And it's whether they can kind of carry on. I mean, the top 3 is not that far off what you would have kind of expected pre-season. You Stockport, Notts County, Mansfield. I don't think that's too far off what most people would have been saying. But then you kind of look at Crewe, Swindon, Wimbledon, kind of all in that top 8, 9.
Yeah. Crawley, 10th even.
Yeah, so it's kind of how those teams. And Accrington in 9th as well, actually.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if they finished top half. But yeah, you've got all those sides there, so it's kind of, how many sides can Doncaster catch up with? And I think after the slow start, it makes it tricky. It's not impossible. I mean, we've seen Bristol Rovers and Bolton come through from that kind of position in the past few seasons.
They've both been able to significantly improve their squads in January.
They have, yeah. I think I probably agree with what Dan was saying there. At the minute, it kind of looks like, they'll probably climb up the table a bit and be a comfortable mid-table where they're kind of in that 10th, 11th region. Just because you look at, some of the sides in the top 7 and they are going to be able to strengthen in January. Gillingham are 7th. You'd imagine they can go and spend a bit more if they need to. So it's going to be quite an ask to overtake pretty much all those other sides. So I think they would do well from here to get up to pushing the edge of the playoffs. Maybe they'll have a little flirt with them at some point and kind of then kick on into next season where they make a much stronger effort next year.
Yeah, could be a 2-year job for Grant McCann at Doncaster. I want to ask you, Dan, about that front pairing of Joe Ironside and Mo Farrell, because they seem to have established a lovely understanding in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ironside scored a brace against Sutton. Mo Farrell scored a lovely goal after a wonderful through ball from Molyneux. But they just seem to know where each other are at the minute. I think Mo Farrell, I think you look for a player to look at him, they probably think that he's going to be the target man. He's going to hold it up and kind of play his feed off of him. But he's just so good with the ball at his feet. It's just started to click for him. Like I said, initially I thought his touch was poor. And it took him maybe 3 or 4 touches to get the ball under control. It's sticking to him now. And you can see it must be one of those confidence players where it's just taken him that couple of games where he's got a goal in each game and he's playing with a smile on his face. And I think that's something that he needs. Ironside, I can't remember seeing a striker so strong at Doncaster. Again, the ball comes into him. You know that he's going to hold it. I feel so sorry for him.
He's a cheap target man, I always think, Dan. I don't think he's necessarily great in the air, but I think if you give him the ball into the right areas, he can hold it up for the people really well. Yeah,
100%. I just think I just feel so sorry for him at the minute because he's just getting pulled from pillar to post. He's getting cuddled, shirt getting tugged off his back, and referees are just not giving him anything. But he's not throwing the toys out of the pram. He reminds me a lot of John Marquis when he was at Doncaster. But with John, he used to get really frustrated with it, and kind of his game had slipped from that. Whereas it seems like Joe thrives off it and wants to get into those battles. So yeah, great striker, and I think it's just giving Mo Farrell a little bit of freedom and a little bit of space in and around the little pockets just outside of the box where he can receive the ball, turn with it and drive, and is scaring defenders at the minute.
Certainly is. Just talk us through the other key players from recent weeks as well, Dan, that have been crucial to the recent form.
I've really liked Owen Bailey.
Yeah.
He started the season in midfield, if I remember rightly. It's been a while.
Versatile, isn't he? Yeah.
But they've moved him back into like the right centre back of a back three. Sorry, no, left centre back of the back three, with Anderson and Olowu. And the back three just seem really solid at the minute, with wing backs of either Tom Nixon, who's looked really good, young lad from Hull, and Luke Molyneux on one of the other wing backs.
Because he's actually left-footed, isn't he, Molyneux?
Yeah. So sometimes he's at left wing back, sometimes he's at right, and when he's on the right, you know that he's just going to try and cut in and get a shot off, and you're just waiting for it to happen. And even though defenders know that it's going to happen, sometimes they can't stop him. A little bit like Iron Robin. Maybe not quite that level.
Interesting comparison. Does Olowu overlap him though when he plays as a right centre back? Because I would have thought that's what you'd want. Because if you've not got a right centre back overlapping Molyneux, or an outside midfielder making an overloading flank, you've got the risk of becoming too narrow when he plays right wing back, because it's like he's cutting inside, but you've just got to defend against that as opposed to having that threat on the outside. Yeah,
we do seem to be a bit more central at the minute. We've got like the midfield three of Close, Westbrook, and Biggins or Tommy Rowe was in there on Saturday, so that is quite congested in the middle of the pitch. But the energy that Molyneux and Nixon have got at the minute, they do give us outlets in the wide areas as well. But it does kind of leave us a little bit open to the counter sometimes.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that all pans out. But listen, Dan, they've got an early start for work tomorrow, so really appreciate you jumping on the pod, and hopefully speak to you again soon, mate.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Take care, guys.
So before we bring in Steve from View from the Findus of Grimsby Town, I'm delighted to introduce our next guest, which is Sam Binch from MTFC Musings of Mansfield Town. The unbeaten Mansfield Town, I'll add as well. You must be buzzing with that, making a mockery of my 13th place prediction, or 14th, did I say, in the end, before the season. Looking pretty good for the Stags at the moment after that 4-1 victory at Notts County.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention your prediction, Gab, honestly.
I've done it for you, mate.
No, obviously Saturday was as good as it gets, really. Thumping your local rivals in a top of the table clash on Sky Sports. It doesn't really get much better than that. I'd say it was one of my best days as a Stags fan, to be honest.
I want to say you've not won at Meadow Lane since 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, it's something around there. I think the last game before Saturday we lost, and I think a couple of draws since then. But yeah, it was just brilliant, and obviously it started so terribly, and you just thought, oh God, here we go again. But I think that's the difference with this team. They've got a resilience which we've not had in recent years, and you could just see that they didn't panic at all after they went behind, and they end up, I think thoroughly deserving the win. I don't think anyone can call that into question.
So I suppose when I was looking at Mansfield before the season, one of my fears was the sort of the risk of stagnation and maybe some of the older players dropping off, and maybe the lack of mobility in certain areas. Has that not been a problem at all? Have you found ways to sort of get around that? Just talk us through how you've kind of overcome that potential risk, if you like.
Yeah, I think that was a fair thought with regards to the attacking players, because we didn't really make any attacking signings. We've kept largely the same attacking options as last season. Yeah. Obviously, we were one of the top scorers in the league last season, so you can see the method behind that. But, the last few games before Saturday, we'd struggled to create a little against good teams, against Gillingham, Wrexham, who's the one, ASA Wimbledon, who are obviously doing well. Yeah. So, we struggled a little bit to find goals after starting the season so well. But I obviously on Saturday it all came together. we've struggled to score from set pieces this season, and obviously we scored 2. Both centre backs got on the score sheet. So yeah, I think that was a valid concern, and I think because against Notts they dominated the ball, whereas in pretty much every single game it's been us trying to find an opening, having lots of the ball and perhaps not creating as much as we should in the last few weeks. But I think that really helped us out, and I think teams had started to find a method of frustrating us sitting behind the ball. I'm thinking of Bradford, Barrow, Wimbledon. They all did the same thing, and it worked to an extent. But yeah, when we're up against a team who, have an equal attacking intent, then I think that helps us out certainly.
Ewan, what did you make of the Stags when they played Bradford?
I went to that game. I love going to Mansfield. It's a really good ground to visit, and I think they've always been, much like Salford have over the past sort of 5 years since they come up, they've always been a team who are going to be in and around the playoffs. And I think it was either going to go one or two ways. Either they drop off slightly like Salford have in recent years, where they haven't been able to make it, or they were going to find a season where they were going to blitz the league and finally get that promotion that they've been working towards. And I think probably that is this season. You've obviously, like you say, with the rotation, I think it's keeping the squad is important. I don't want to delve too much into Bradford's performance or that game because it was absolutely dreadful. It was a real waste of a trip on a Tuesday night. But like you say, it was very much a cancelling out sort of game. So it is about really for Mansfield finding the way to break down those teams who do sit in those games that do kind of stale over.
Ben, based on Mansfield shot data in the first 5 or 6 weeks or so, they looked really strong. Obviously, more recently, Sam's alluded to some creative struggles, but it's considering after that 4-1 victory at Notts County. What do you make of their sort of promotion prospects?
I think even when they were struggling to find the net for a couple of games, they were still being solid themselves, and probably alongside Stockport, are probably the only other team who have been both good going forward and pretty solid at the back. I mean, you look at pretty much all the other sides up at the top, and they've either got defensive issues where, you've got Notts County and Wrexham have both conceded 25 goals, which is a phenomenal amount for this stage of the season for
Notts County have the second worst defensive record in the league.
Yeah, I think both of them joint second worst behind Sutton, which is it's crazy. And then you've got kind of Gillingham who are okay defensively, but they aren't really exposing themselves.
Yeah, they've been pretty poor going forward, haven't they?
Yeah, but I think the thing with their defensive record though, it might be a bit misleading because if they were a bit more attacking, they might be conceding more as well. But yeah, in terms of Mansfield, I think, as I was saying, alongside Stockport, they look, one of the better, more balanced sides, which is a good thing going forward. So they can grind those draws out when they need to, and that's the advantage you've got with having Clough. He kind of probably knows that there are games where you don't need to go gung-ho and push for the win, and you can just kind of take the draw and accumulate the points. So, yeah, I was really impressed when I saw them, I think, towards the back end of last season at our place. And, yeah, they seem to have carried that into this year. And as long as they don't have any really big kind of injury problems, because they do, I think, have one of the smaller squads of the teams around the top 7, then, yeah, they look good for going the distance.
Yeah, that sounds really encouraging. Ben mentioned there the solidity of Mansfield, and I suppose we can't talk about solidity without talking about Aidan Flint. You get these goons who doubted the Aidan Flint signing. He's been brilliant alongside Cargill. Just talk to us about that pairing and how they complement each other.
Yeah, I think just touching on what Ben said there about Nigel Clough, like one of his mottos that he says a lot is, if you can't win, then don't lose. So there has been a lot of draws within that unbeaten run. But I think that sort of, a loss can hurt the confidence, can't it? And I think with if you keep picking up points, even though if you're not winning every game, then it does build confidence. But yeah, to go to Cargill and Flint, they've been brilliant. They haven't actually played together that much, I don't think, throughout. I think that's probably one of the second or third time they've started together as a partnership on Saturday, because Lewis Brunt's been playing quite a lot, and obviously don't change a winning side, so he kept his place until he made one too many errors. But yeah, they complement each other nicely. Flint's obviously dominant in the air. Cargill also good in the air, but he's also he can play as well. He's a really good passer of the ball. Obviously right foot and left foot as well, combination. So it's just worked out well, and they've got, as well as quality from playing at a higher level, they've also got tons and tons of experience, which I think helps to settle those around. When you got, for instance, Jordan Bowery playing right back, who's obviously a very experienced player, but not necessarily a very experienced right back. Yeah. Obviously, when he looks to the left and sees Aidan Flint next to him, obviously that must really, must really build him up to think, if I make a mistake, he's gonna help me out. So, yeah, I think the defence has been the main reason, I think, for the improvement. Who'd have thought having proper defenders defending, apart from Jordan Bowery, would work.
Yeah, you can never, you can never deny Clough the opportunity to put a striker at right back. Like that's just that's his favourite. But no, listen, he's doing an amazing job this season, and all credit to him. And is there any area where Mansfield need to improve? Maybe is there the potential to add a little bit of pace in January, possibly using the loan market to give you something different?
Yeah, I think perhaps another attacking option wouldn't hurt. We've got Will Swan and James Gale, who obviously both still young. Will Swan hasn't really got going yet this season. He's struggled. I think he's only scored one, and that was a penalty. So he's struggled to find goal scoring opportunities. So yeah, I think another striker with perhaps a bit of pace, or someone who can, as Keeler Dunn does, perhaps just play behind, but maybe a left-footed option rather than a right-footed option. That could work nicely.
Keeler Dunn looked amazing. Sorry, just to add to that, Keeler Dunn looked amazing, didn't he, at Meadow Lane?
Yeah, he's been a revelation. You just, when he gets the ball, you just know something's going to happen. It might be that he shoots from 40 yards and it goes 30 yards wide, but to have the confidence to try those sort of things. I remember in the Wimbledon game, he tried a shot from the halfway line, and Clough obviously went mental at him on the sideline. But to have that sort of confidence, you're at the top of your game. Obviously, he nearly scored hitting the post. I think he got 2 assists, and he put the corner in for the Flint goal as well. So, yeah, he's playing amazing. And just to touch on Clough, I think he got his tactics spot on Saturday, because the County just looked absolutely clueless when they were being pressed so high up the pitch. They just couldn't get out there. I think Sam Slocum had over 100 touches of the ball, because they just kept going back to him every single time, to the point where it was getting ironic cheers every time the ball went back to him from the Mansfield fans. So yeah, just to give Clough his props there. I think he got one over on Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. Really impressive pressing job from that point of view. Sam, do you subscribe to the view that Mansfield have one of the best midfields in the league?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the options we've got in there, when you consider Anthony Hartigan's was allowed to go out on loan to the National League, and I think he would probably get in a lot of midfields, a lot of League Two midfields. I think he's been getting plaudits at Barnet. And when you got Hiram Boateng on the bench, who again would probably, he would probably be considered a starter for a lot of teams. But that diamond, I think, suits us really well. It allows us to get all our key players on the pitch. You got the drive of Ollie Clark, the technical ability of Maris and Reed in there, and just the pure energy of Aaron Lewis, who just seems to be everywhere on the field. I didn't expect him to come in and play in midfield. I thought he was being signed as cover at fullback, but he's been brilliant. He's just obviously. I've never seen. I didn't even know he could play in midfield until he came here. So yeah, he's just gets around the pitch and shuttles across, helps out the fullback. He's been a
I
revelation.
think that boundless energy as well is great for like a role playing wide in a diamond, because it allows you to then have a bit like Lapsley, I thought, used to have with Hewitt, that sort of relationship on the right hand side. You could argue Quinn with McLaughlin as well. I know Quinn's absent at the moment, but like that bit of energy to be able to get up and down, it just gives you a different dimension to the technicians that you mentioned there.
Yeah, I think that also probably helps that he's naturally a fullback or a wing back, and he understands what to do when perhaps he's got to go out and cover the right back spot. He knows what position he needs to be in, and he's been one of our players of the season so far. He's played every minute when he's been fit.
Yeah, well, it's really encouraging start, I think, for Mansfield Town, and hopefully you're still unbeaten when we next have you on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it going as long as we can.
Cheers, Sam. Go check out Mansfield Musings, everyone. And thanks for your time, mate.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers. So our last and final guest is Steve from A View from the Findus podcast of Grimsby Town. Nice to meet you, Steve. How are you, mate?
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to have you on. Wish we could be talking about Grimsby Town in more positive fashion, I suppose, because it's a great time for the club from an ownership and structural point of view, because there's so much encouragement about the work that Jason Stockwood and Debbie Cook and Andrew Pettis are doing there. Unfortunately, on the pit field, it's a slightly different story on current form.
Yeah, very much so. I feel I've just sat and listened to obviously the Mansfield fan before me, and I'm chuffed to bits for him that their season's going brilliantly, because ours very much is stagnating at the moment. And I know Adam from our podcast has been on a couple of times, hasn't he? And I feel he's had the luxury of coming on as Mr. Positive. It's going to click soon, and I get wheeled.
They give you the boring jobs, Steve.
Yeah. So Town have now won 1 in 8, and here I am. So as much as I'm a glass half full kind of guy normally, I'm really struggling to put positives out of the last few weeks.
Well, let's go to the negatives then, Steve. What do you think is going wrong at Grimsby?
It's hard to put your finger on it, really. Similar to what Adam and I have spoke about in the past, that we felt that there's mitigating circumstances for a long time in the season. I know Adam discussed with you, we had quite a tough start fixture-wise, and I think there's a narrative around that. We've played Mansfield and a lot of the big boys already. So a lot of us were waiting to get through that spell of fixtures and thinking, it'll click soon, we'll get into gear. And that in conjunction with injuries, we've been quite unlucky, to be fair, with injuries this season, to the point that a week or so ago with the trophy game, we had 10 players unavailable through a mixture of injuries and suspension, international call-ups, and 10's quite a big number for a squad of our size. But we got through them tricky fixtures, and we really were looking to pick up points really in the last week or two. And we had a bit of a false dawn with a win at home against Barrow, although the performance was probably poorer than most of the other home games we'd seen. They managed to get the results, and we were very much keen to see Town go build on that. And to follow it up with an away game at Tranmere, you were kind of feeling this is the time to really kick on. But to take the lead, be 2-1 up and to get pegged back at 2-2, just another disappointing afternoon. And we said at the time on the podcast that point away at Tranmere could be a good point if we followed it up with a win against Accrington. But seemingly it wasn't a great point, because we then went and lost at home to Accrington. So we just feel that we're stuck in the wrong gear at the minute and we're not getting going. And there's a bit of discontent growing, I say slowly, it seems to be getting a bit bigger quite quickly around Paul Hurst. I'm not particularly one of those at the moment, but the minority that question him is growing in number by the week.
Ben, what did you make of Tranmere when you saw the 2-2 draw at Prenton Park?
It was quite an even game. I think we were the better side the first 20 in each half, and then Grimsby sort of the second part of each half. So they finished the game stronger. 2-2 was probably a fair reflection overall because of that. It was. I think that's about all you can say from the game. It wasn't mind-blowing football at any point from either side. It was a little bit attritional at times. Both teams were quite weak defensively on that day, because I think all 4 goals were pretty soft. Both the 2 we scored and the 2 Grimsby scored. So, probably annoyed both the managers on that point of view. Yeah, it's probably quite a tough one for Grimsby because they kind of might have come into the season with expectations, but there's just so many clubs spending big money this year with really strong squads that they kind of just fall into that middle bracket of probably need to overachieve to reach
You know
the
what,
playoffs.
Ben? I don't know that I fully agree with that. And Steve, feel free to come in on this at any moment. But as much as I agree with your point, Ben, that the league has been strengthened, Grimsby have brought in a promotion-winning centre forward in Danny Rose. They brought in Camille Conte, who was incredibly highly rated and would have been sought after probably by League One clubs, possibly, as well as League Two clubs. So I don't look at this. They finished 11th last season, and Paul Hurst has been back to bring in 10, 11 new players in this summer. And as much as I understand the argument for giving managers time and backing them through difficult circumstances and this, I do find myself feeling like I want to see more from Grimsby than what I'm seeing at the moment.
I completely agree with you, Gav. To be honest with you, I think we had this debate on Sunday night when we recorded this week's podcast. I made the point of saying individually, in terms of signings and squad, we've got a collective bunch of better individuals this season than last season. But are we a better team than last season? No, probably not. At the moment, despite individually across the pitch just having better players than last season, I still think if a one-off game was possible, last season's team that had that cup run would probably beat the current lot. And it's digging deeper into why that's the case, isn't it? And I think that's the growing frustration. We've seen some very good performances at home this season. It's not all doom and gloom. And the results didn't quite come. We drew against Mansfield, for example, and we played pretty well away at Bradford in the first half, just couldn't follow up in the second half. And we felt for a long time we were just that close to it clicking into place. It just doesn't seem to be happening, and it's starting to question as to why now. So just growing frustration, and we've got some big fixtures coming up now because pressure is starting to build. We have Stockport away, unfortunately, on Saturday, which they've not done much recently, have they, other than win 7 in a row. So in terms of where you really could do with playing someone low on confidence, that's just not the case this weekend. So I think many people have already, rightly or wrongly, writing the weekend off. But Town being Town, it's a sort of game they sometimes throw a surprise. I'd like to think they can, but...
Do you know what? I think that's probably where I'd have some faith in Hurst to be able to devise a strategy for a one-off game to sort of expose the weaknesses in opponents and that kind of thing. Ewan, you look like you're going to chip in with something.
I was waiting for you to ask for my obligatory opinion on what I thought of Grimsby and Bradford's game earlier in the season, which was mentioned. It was a weird game. We sat off completely in the first half, and Grimsby did look really good. And this was sort of you started the season really well with a very tough list of fixtures, some really good draws away from home, some very good wins against good teams. But we changed things around in the second half and ultimately came away with a point that maybe we deserved. That's debatable. I find a lot of similarities between the story of Doncaster and Grimsby this season, with the sort of turnover of the squad and the players that have come in, and sort of maybe it hasn't quite clicked into gear yet, but it probably will in the future. And I definitely predict a top half finish for Grimsby if Hurst is kept on. I'm a big believer in, like you say, in his project and his ability to manage and bring out the best in his players. Like I say, a really tough start, and it is only continuing, like you say, with playing Stockport on Saturday. So I'd say that I think if you stick by Hurst, the points will start to come again, just with it's a confidence thing, probably.
I'm inclined to agree, really. Yeah, I think he's been... The beauty of having Paul Hurst is that he's been here before. He's been at this club over his 2 spells a long time. We've been in this situation before. He's ultimately found a way through it. Yeah, Stockport's not ideal on Saturday. It's a bit of a free hit him anyways, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the next 2 fixtures after that, we've got Colchester at home on Tuesday, which is a huge game.
Yeah.
I think they're 22nd, are they? And then Doncaster away the week after, who are 19th. So you'd like to think we could get some points on the board in the next week or so.
Also, I think if you get a result at Stockport or even lose but put in a really encouraging performance, you can almost take some you can take some confidence from that as well. And
galvanise them.
And maybe find some form from there. How's Camille Conte been? Because when we spoke to Adam, we were waxing lyrical about him a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's been a strange one, really. When we first saw him begin the season, we couldn't believe our luck in the sense that what is this guy doing in League Two, essentially? And we were talking about him. And generally, for a long time, a good month or so, didn't think we'd be seeing him still here in January. I thought it would matter of time. Partly, I thought, wait till we play Wrexham, they'll see him, he'll go. Because that's the sort of thing I think they'll end up doing, isn't it? But yeah, he started this season fantastic for a month or so. But in a weird way, it's sort of tailed off so far. And as of a week ago, because he's already had a suspension already, at one point he had 6 yellow cards in 10 games, which is one heck of a ratio, isn't it? And a few times Hurst has been hooking him off on a yellow. And he just seems to have lost his confidence. But unfortunately for us, he's not the only one. It seems to have happened to 4 or 5 of them all in one go. So Harry Clifton, who I've heard you talk about before on this podcast, Player of the Year last year, he looks a shadow of himself at the moment, and I'm sure that will come right. But he's one of a handful of players who just don't look to be full of confidence. And you can sometimes get away with carrying 1, maybe 2 in that boat. But currently at the moment, we're at about 4 or 5.
Yeah, the Clifton thing really surprises me because you're right. Adam mentioned that as well. And I would have thought Clifton would be the one player where it's like you get a 7 out of 10 every game because he is such an athlete and he covers so much ground and he's not the best technically. And I would have thought he would be the one where his performance levels don't really fluctuate too much. So I'm actually surprised to hear that it's a confidence thing with Clifton.
It's a difficult one, really, because last year he featured most weeks and he's never really in his town career nailed down an actual position. But last year, he was integral to the way we played, to the point that regardless of who started, there was always a place for Clifton. It wasn't always in the same position. But him and McAtee last year really drove us on with the pressing and the energy. Yeah. And we generally looked to pour aside when he wasn't in it, regardless of what position he was playing. But this year, perhaps maybe McAtee's not there with that driving force as well. He just seems a bit lost. And I'm sure it'll come good. He scored away at Notts County, I think, off the top of my head. But he's missed a couple of sitters recently, and it's just a confidence thing for him, I think. I think he'll probably score a goal without thinking much about it in the next 2 weeks, and it'll all come flooding back. That's the nature of being a footballer, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Steve, thanks so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. Go check out, everyone, the View from the Findus podcast. Thanks to my co-host, Ben Jones on Tranmere Rovers. And thanks to Ewan Hudson, the Bradford City supporter, for fellow co-hosting duties as well. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been EFL Debate, the League 2 podcast. We'll see you again next week.